My name is Laura Muma. I'm the convener of the Victorian Environment Friends Network. And on behalf of our network, welcome this evening. I begin by thanking the First Nations custodians of the many lands we are on this evening. We thank them for their centuries of caring for country. We seek to learn from and work with them. And we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, particularly those of you who are here with us tonight. And I thank our co-host, Evan, which stands for Environmental Volunteer and Agency Network Central West, quite a mouthful, and DELP, the Victorian Department of Environment in brief, for a community volunteer action grant to support this webinar. Our network, the VEFN, supports environmental groups to promote, advocate for, and care for the special places and species of Victoria. Our members include field naturalists, citizen science groups, friends of groups, wildlife gardening groups, land care groups, and others, reflecting the many different ways we can care for nature. With this webinar, we have two linked goals. The first, to provide young people with examples and opportunities of getting involved in caring for nature through volunteering and/or careers. I'm sure you all know we have and are inflicting tremendous damage to our environment. We need use energy, creativity, your questions, your different ideas and ways of doing things. And we need to welcome you to join us. And secondly, to give environmental volunteer groups insights and tips for engaging youth. We have an inspiring lineup of speakers and panel guided by inspirational young moderators, Laura T. and Kylie, who will be introducing themselves shortly. So it's my pleasure now to hand over to Cherie, who is one of the founders of Evan, to introduce Evan Central West to us. And I'll just close by saying that the VEFN is a member of Evan. We do lots of networking because we truly believe we need networks. We need to work together because doing so, we can support nature and make a difference across the landscape. So, Cherie?
What a pleasure to be here with everybody and to see such a diversity, not only of our speakers, but also the participating audience. It's fantastic, and thanks so much for your time this evening to be here. My name's Cherie Draper, and as Laura mentioned, I am one of the co-founders of the Environmental Volunteer and Agency Network, which is focused on the Central West area of Victoria, which spans quite a range. And we do have quite a lot of in common with the aims of the Victorian Environmental Friends Network. So basically, our purpose is to connect and foster collaboration between environmental volunteers, people who care for nature, and the agencies. So working together toward caring for nature outcomes and our shared well-being as well. And of the 5 focus areas that we have, 2 of them this webinar really touches on tonight. One of those is strengthening the connections between environmental volunteering groups through sharing of information and ideas and fostering those connections, and also nurturing effective connections between the wider community. And part of that is through engaging with new audiences, and the youth and the upcoming generations are a big part of that. So as Laura mentioned, we really do need and value that vitality that youth can bring to this caring for nature space, and look forward to working toward a healthier future for all of us. So I'd love to hand over to Laura Town-Hodkinson and Kylie Cohen, two of our very energetic and youthful moderators for this evening. So thanks so much again, everybody, for joining us, and thanks, Laura and Kylie.
Thank you so much, Cherie and Laura, for that very, very kind passover. We may be young, but energetic. We'll try and bring those levels for sure today. Kylie and I are both really, really excited and honoured to be co-hosting. We're a little bit Tweedledee and Tweedledum, the two of us, as we've practiced our routine for tonight. I'll introduce myself first. So I have received the name Laura T. I currently work with Coast Care for the Department of Environment. I'm a facilitator in the South Gippsland coastal environment. And in that role, I work a lot with environmental volunteers. That's a massive part of my role. And how I actually got to that position was through a lot of experience doing volunteering myself. I've waded through mud to look at frogs. I've gone through the ocean and algae to do fish counts. And I've gone through deserts. So you name it, and I've surveyed it. And I've really enjoyed all my experiences, which I can touch on a bit further. But I'll pass over to Kylie now to give an introduction.
Thank you very much, Laura. Yeah, as Laura said, my name is Kylie. I am the Biodiversity Officer at Knox City Council and also very excited to be here. That's my current role, but I definitely, prior to that and still to this day, have done plenty of volunteering. I've done very on and off casual volunteering along the coast and also further inland, but a lot of my ongoing volunteering was based in and around Knox, so very local to what was my home at the time. And I was part of the BEFN for a little while, so I had some committee experience in the environmental sector. So yeah, between Laura and I'm sure we probably haven't had as much volunteer experience as some of our participants who are joining the webinar tonight. But yeah, I suppose we've definitely had a flavour of it, and we're going to learn so much from all our other panellists, and hopefully collectively we can all do a bit of a deep dive into volunteering in Victoria, but also what it means to be a youth who volunteers and what it means to volunteer with youth. But before we do get started on tonight's schedule, a couple housekeeping things that you should know. This webinar is going to be recorded, and we are hoping to use it for future resources. You don't need to worry about your audio or your camera because they are automatically turned off. So you can relax tonight and enjoy yourself. But please note, whatever you pop in the chat will be involved in this recording. But in saying that, we encourage you to please share all your experiences, chat with one another, or if there are resources you're very fond of, please feel free to share it. And that brings me to the first part of the housekeeping, which is the chat. The chat is going to be your best friend for those things that I mentioned. So that's chatting with each other, sharing resources, and just general conversation. If you're new to Zoom and don't know what the chat is, I've circled it here on the screen. So chat there is what you're looking for. And you want to make sure, if you want to share something to the group, there's a little drop down box at the two. Just make sure that that says everyone, so that you are sharing it to everyone who is here, or you can direct it specifically to the host and panelist. Very importantly tonight, as we said, we've got a tight schedule and we're keen to hear from everyone and answer as many questions as possible. To best channel our questions, we ask that you please put all your questions in the Q&A section. Now I'm going to double check that everyone can answer. Oh yeah, cool. So Q&A is where I've circled this Q&A symbol. So yeah, if you pop your questions in there, it means we can either answer your question live and keep track of it so it doesn't get lost in the chat, or our panelists will be typing answers as they go. Other important things that you guys should know tonight is that we are going to do a poll right before we kick off, and that'll just pop up on your screen and you can just click your answers. But first, I'll hand back to Laura to explain what tonight's going to look like.
Thank you so much, Kylie, for walking us through that. Our program overview is, look, it's jam-packed. We've got the best of the best here tonight, and we're very, very lucky for that. So the first section of the evening will have two presentations, one by Lucinda Cameron and one representing the Urban Gorillas. Then we're going to have a question and answer session. So that's when Kylie and I will look at any questions in the chat that are directly related to the first two presentations, and they'll be answered there. Then we'll move on to two more presentations by Liz Wade and Adric Wright, and then we'll do another Q&A, a quick brief one, and pull out any questions from the chat for those two presenters. And that will bring us to the final section of the night, which is an environmental panel with Friends of Bannockburn Bush, Intrepid Landcare, and Ballarat Action Climate Co-op. So we've got a huge diversity of speakers talking on really, really engaging topics, and we're very excited to get straight into it. Now, I believe that we do have a poll before we begin. Kylie, I'll hand it over to you.
You're beautiful. So just to see that we're all awake, we're all feeling familiar with Zoom, hopefully, we're going to do a really quick poll. So I am going to launch this poll. There are 3 questions that it's going to ask you to answer. And then once it feels like a fair amount of participants have answered, we're going to reveal. So the questions are, what is your current volunteering experience? Are you new to volunteering? Do you occasionally volunteer? Or do you regularly volunteer? Second question is, what are your primary reasons for volunteering, if you do? And the final question is, what form of volunteering do you most often do, whether it's on ground? And we know the environmental sector is so diverse, especially with volunteering, and the beauty of the environment and also biodiversity is that it covers basically every sector. So volunteering can be digital, it can be creative, it can be on ground. Lovely. We've got a couple more answers flowing through. A bit of elevator music. Laura T, do you want to cover the elevator?
Love it. Thank you.
Good stuff. 91% of participants have answered the poll. And I feel like now is a good time to do a grand reveal of the answers. Can everyone see those poll results? Have they come up all right for everyone?
Looks great, Kylie.
Perfect. So have a bit of a look at that. Of us, those who have volunteers, most of us are regular volunteers, but there are excitingly people who haven't volunteered before. Primary reasons is giving back to the environment, and most of us volunteer on ground. Beautiful.
Great. Thank you so much, Kylie. It's great to get a bit of a picture of the audience here tonight, and it's fantastic to see that diversity. And hopefully for the people that haven't volunteered before, we will have changed your mind and got you on board the volunteer train by the end of this presentations. So to jump into them, first speaker for this evening is Lucinda Cameron. Lucinda is undertaking a research and evaluation project as part of a work placement with the Victorian Environment Friends Network. The project includes investigating the engagement of youth in environmental volunteering. Lucinda is currently in her 3rd year of university, completing the Bachelor of Environment and Society at RMIT. Quite an impressive CV. So I will pass over to Lucinda. Thank you so much.
Hello, I just want to double check everybody can see my screen.
We can, Lucinda, thank you.
Perfect. All right. So hi, as just said before, my name's Lucinda Cameron and I'm currently interning with the Victorian Environmental Friends Network. So before we jump into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in today. This webinar is a really exciting opportunity to learn about different experiences and have a really good conversation about youth in the volunteer space. So a little bit about me, I'm still studying in university. I've almost completed my Bachelor of Environment and Society. Throughout my studies, I've engaged with climate change science, sustainability communication, community engagement, and a bit of urban planning, as well as practical skills. So my role today with Victorian Environmental Friends Network has been a research assistant, and I'm currently exploring youth engagement in environmental volunteering using the Caring for Nature Expo that just happened a little bit earlier this year as a case study. All right, so just a little bit of context. So the aim of what the research that I've been doing over the past couple of months has been to understand the motivations, benefits, levels of engagement, limitations, and ideas for improving the status of young people that have been volunteering. And in general, learning and sharing these ideas can help us gain a unique insight into why young people do or don't volunteer. So, for environmental volunteering or local climate activism work specifically, young people can often find ways of new promotion and bringing new passion and new people. But in the long term, sometimes this can lead to burnout or hopelessness and finding for ideas that are so important and they can also feel impossible to change. So, in this being said, my research aims to look at the core motivations for youth volunteering and how organisations can support youth volunteers. And if the Caring for Nature Expo that was this year gave both young people and stallholders a space to do so. So the Caring for Nature Expo was a bit of a half job expo with stalls of local environmental groups and agencies there, letting people know about who they are, why they're there, and then half festival as well with music, food, and interactive demonstrations, all with the focus of trying to engage youth in the area. So to start my research after participating in a few planning meetings, I first decided to interview some local groups that Victorian Environmental Friends Network had already got in touch with. These two groups I was able to spend some time with ranged from older university students to late secondary students who had participated in local youth groups. So with these two groups, I really wanted to start understanding the key themes around volunteering, including motivations and barriers. I feel like this would give us a good basis that I could base my Expo Day questions on. So some of the statements about motivations included, quote, being able to put back in the community, and I felt was a part I felt was really important. I was able to help people in my demographic, which is something that I'm missing at uni, unquote, and quote, that the helping people aspect, meeting new people, even just making a small impact on something, unquote. So as you can see here, there is a sense of intrinsic and altruistic motivation that youth have around volunteering. While we should still keep in mind this is a small sample, these themes of passion, experience, and sense of community was brought up pretty much every single time that I asked questions about motivation. Another topic of discussion was limitations surrounding volunteering, and a couple of the answers I got included having a lack of experience was intimidating when first wanting to volunteer, as well as time, location, accessibility, and a lack of energy after school, sports, or just general workload. So relating to the Caring for Nature Expo, I asked a few questions about how volunteer organisations could best engage young people. The uni students said, quote, email and sign up. Even if I keep getting updates, it reminds me to fit in volunteering, unquote. And quote, finding volunteer opportunities by location would be useful. I'm more likely to show up to the events if they're close to me, unquote. And when I asked the secondary students what drew them to look at different stalls, they all said free stuff. So I pressed on this a little bit more, and so things like taking home pens, stickers, brochures, or even small little snacks helped make the stall more memorable, and it would remind them to follow up on the stalls in their own time. So to recap, before the expo, we knew that inspiring volunteer action would rely on tapping into someone's passions, having a way to keep potential volunteers updated, and to keep events local where possible. So at this point, after talking to a few groups and sharing some ideas about general youth engagement and planning meetings, the Expo Day was quickly approaching. And to get a well-rounded snapshot of youth engagement on the day, I split my questions into stallholders and youth attendees. When talking to younger people, I would ask them questions surrounding experience volunteering, motivations, barriers, and stallholders are most interested in looking at, as well as some other things such as what I think of the setup of the expo and the strength of advertising. And when talking to stallholders, it'd be a bit similar. I want to focus on their experience of signing up for the expo setup, as well as talking about the organisation's goals, if they offered youth volunteering programs, and how they plan to support youth in volunteering. And so on the day, what I want to make note of most was there was a lack of young people there. You saw a lot of families with kids and not anyone older. So during my time there, I was only able to chat to 4 youth. There were more around, but at the time I went looking for them, they'd already left. Now, 3 out of the 4 people that I talked to, 4 youth that I talked to, were either there with their families or were there because they were representing an organisation that was at the expo. And only one person I spoke to was actually there because they heard about it through school. The overarching themes I got from these interviews were that they were passionate about the environment and they were wanting to find where they would fit in and what their role could be, whether it be through family or through school. They were most interested in understanding local issues that the environment was facing, as well as using the expo as a way to network and gauge what kind of jobs they can get in the sustainability field. Volunteering was something else really positive about, with quotes like, quote, "I want to do what I can," and quote, "even if I can help a little bit, it still matters." So a key theme that the surface from attendees, volunteer attendees in specific, was being acknowledged for the work that was being done, and even in acknowledging their work in larger groups is a critical aspect that would encourage them to return, as well as being able to see some sort of change, like tree planting, for example, could help with feelings of burnout. On the stallholder side, they were there for the things we think they would be, raising awareness for local issues and having encouraging sign-ups. The main thing to do with volunteers is a lot of them didn't actually have youth programs for under 18s. They simply just didn't have the time or the resources to do that. But when I was talking about these ideas, I said they did want to set up youth programs in the future. And in terms of advertising, overall, there were a lot of mixed opinions. Some people thought it was great and it produced the expected turnout, and other people said it needed a little bit more work and they expected a more youth turnout. So this brings us to where I am now in the research. We've currently set up a few more surveys. We had an exit survey there to get data from, and we're still getting some data rolling in. We've conducted a few more interviews with stallholders, and I'm currently finishing up my data collection. So what have we learned? So the main takeaways I got from this project includes 3 things. So one is to understand your key audience. What kind of topics do youth want to engage in more and why, as well as understanding locations, if you're doing a physical event, or days, if you're doing a digital event as well. So example of this in the planning stage for us was after some feedback, we changed some of our presentations from being solely job focused to being more broad, more relevant to issues that youth might engage with environmental spaces, such as dealing with climate anxiety. Number 2, don't be afraid to try out new advertising styles. The ads for the Caring for Nature Expo were placed in the local newspaper, as well as school notice boards, and one on Facebook group centered around Friends of the Earth, or Friends of your local location goes here kind of networks, which was still a great effort for the first expo, and there was still a really good turnout. It wasn't great in terms of outreach to young people. So linking back in with point 1, understanding where your audience interact with these type of ideas or these type of events, and in what form, whether it be a video, photo, infographic, can increase your engagement with different demographics. And finally is that young people are interested in the environment and do want to make a change. Including these youth programs help youth feel like they're heard in this ever-changing time period. Listening to them and giving them space to feel upset or angry or curious will develop their curiosities and passions and motivations to actually take action. That's it from me. Thank you so much for listening, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks so much, Lucinda. So if anyone has any questions for Lucinda, please feel free to chuck them in the chat. As we mentioned, this was recorded because obviously Lucinda's put so much work into that and there's so much to cover, so you can always go back and have a listen to more. So we are really excited to introduce our next guest from the Urban Gorillas. I'm going to introduce Sam and some of the other Urban Gorillas who are here with us. So Sam Russell is a founder of the youth-focused environmental group Urban Gorillas, whose members are environmental students in universities, predominantly from Deakin. The group strives to reintroduce and restore Indigenous biodiversity in urban landscapes, and while doing so, invite and encourage community members to take part and learn about their local environment. Sam and the group focus on building a community of young adults who want to expand their friendship circle and connection with nature, as well as improve their knowledge and capabilities. Over to you, Sam. Thank you.
Just double checking the microphone is working the way it should be working. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Sam. Thank you.
Beautiful. It's going to be a trifecta, the 3 of us, so hopefully it runs smoothly. So Sarah is sharing the screen, I believe. Cancel. Hello. Before we begin, Urban Gorillas would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners and original custodians of this land. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and to any First Nations people who are joining us today. We also want to note that this land was never ceded, and this was and always will be Aboriginal land. Our goal one of our goals is to restore urban landscapes back to their original health and biodiversity. We're doing this by following appropriate EVCs, which will indicate what the land looked like before colonization. Sarah, could you please skip to the next slide? Thank you. Bit of a mission statement situation happening. Incorporating Indigenous respect and belief is a quintessential construct. Ecological restoration lies at the foundation that Indigenous land is the original land, and to do the job correctly, we have to follow that mindset. So in doing that, we follow EVCs according to the land. So we talk to local experts. We follow sort of the appropriate EVCs for that, so we can find the appropriate vegetation to plant in there. And in that way, we can actually restore the land back to where it was. Bit of a fluff around with that one. Essentially, we're just restoring biodiversity with the appropriate vegetation, because without the vegetation, we can't have all the animals, fungi, and indigenously was here to begin with. Without interacting with local communities, friends groups, schools, and all walks of life, our events would not be possible. We owe our success equally to our volunteers as well as to our active members. Restoring biodiversity doesn't happen without effort and collective vision, and Urban Gorillas has connected with multiple friends groups, giving them the help and they need. We've been heavily involved with Keilor-Kit Alliance, Yarra Riverkeeper, Bernard Council, and Melbourne Water, and have seen people enter from all corners around Melbourne. We believe that the bar of knowledge should be raised collectively, and whatever knowledge we learn, we would like to equally share that knowledge. Without knowledge, people feel left behind or in the dark, and we believe that everyone, no matter your origin, should have access and support to a fair education. Major issue in caring for our environment is the lack of knowledge, and we want to be best to bridge that gap. I think leveling the playing field and inspiring others to learn along with us, and then transferring that knowledge down the line will help inspire and encourage younger generations to get involved. These overarching themes are tying together a lot of holistic thinking and intersectionality, and youth are a big driver in that, because we want to leave this group to our predecessors. So like when this group becomes large enough, which it is growing, it's fantastic to see, but young minds are the best minds, because they're always progressively thinking, they're always thinking of newer innovative ways of how to change and solve problems. So passing the torch is definitely a big key. And we'll go to the next slide, which I think Sarah, if that works. Yeah. So yeah, always chasing knowledge, but having enough to educate. So always look for knowledge, but I think if you're going to educate someone, you want to have enough foundational, I guess, strength behind that. So us as a unit, building strength and then distributing it out equally. So now I'll pass on to Sarah, who will be chatting now. Thank you.
Hi everyone, as Sam mentioned, I'm Sarah. I'm a part of Urban Gorillas, and I just wanted to run you guys through some of the achievements that we've accomplished throughout our time. So even though Urban Gorillas is predominantly like a new development, we've still achieved so much in the short amount of time that we've been active. So since our origin a year ago, we've applied and have been accepted for a grant from Melbourne Water. And this has been really helpful in funding some of our events. So like our planting and weeding events, it's made it really happen. We've also been featured in blog posts and podcasts from Deakin University and with Yarra Riverkeeper Association. And this has really helped us in building our community, whom have come together, and we came together for our first major planting event. That was July this year. And it was just absolutely amazing, massive success. And we've gone on to do 3 more smaller plantings. And these have been just as beneficial in our goal in restoring the environment and expanding our community, which is built up of close to 200 members now, which is really good for just the short amount of time we've been active. These are just some photos we wanted to share with you guys, just of some of the events that we've had, just showing all of the people that we've had active within the Urban Gorillas community, and just some of the nitty gritty, getting our hands dirty and just really like being one with the environment. So following the success of some of our plantings, we have so many more upcoming events that we're really excited about. These are things such as a bird watching event, weeding our first planting site. You've got to take care of the sites that we plant, of course. So we've got a weeding event coming up. And one concept that we're really passionate about is a sensory friendly garden. And this is dedicated especially to those of us in our community who are neurodivergent and would normally feel overwhelmed and overstimulated at our regular events with such large amounts of people. So we really want to create an event that's comfortable and dedicated to those who are neurodivergent. And as we mentioned before, we really want Urban Gorillas to be a group and a community where we can make all people of all abilities and backgrounds feel welcome. And on top of these events, not only do we have the tangible goals and events coming up, but we also have like lots of goals that we're striving for that aren't tangible, and so they're more concepts. So of course we really want to strengthen our connection to the environment and with nature. We really want to provide opportunities for other people of all ages. We're really focused on youth, but of course other people of other abilities and ages are always welcome within the community. And we don't obviously want to do this, but we want to do it for other people and ourselves and everyone. And of course, we want to leave our mark on this earth and make an impact for knowing that we've made this place better.
Cool. So, hey guys, I'm Cal. I'm studying at Deakin, also a part of Urban Gorillas. So I think it's really important to keep in mind that everyone has their own lives, and volunteering isn't always necessarily at the top of people's lists. So we have to make sure that we engage with the group, and we make sure that people are supported when we engage with them. So we have a core team that really gets things done, especially when we have larger events. It's awesome to see passionate people, all driving towards a common goal, and having all these young people from uni and from outside as well, the community, coming together as one. But a big part of this is communication. So we always make sure to communicate with each other, either through the group on Facebook, through messages to each other while we're doing tasks to support each other, or even creating like social events regularly for everyone who's interested in growing their friends or professional network. And as Lucinda mentioned in her presentation earlier, community and people are often the most important part of volunteering for young people as well. But to build Urban Gorillas from the ground up, we needed to utilise the strength of our members to kind of build a base of what we currently are as Urban Gorillas. So all the strengths that we already have, but that's not necessarily enough to keep us going. We needed to challenge ourselves and others to grow, and also to step out of our comfort zones. So if you're interested in joining a group like ours or creating one of your own, you'll need to challenge yourself. So networking and volunteering opportunities are everywhere, and understand that the elders of our community often have awesome contacts, life experiences, and wisdom to share. Probably the most important thing is to be yourself unashamedly. I love birds, so I'll be hosting a bird event in a few weeks' time to get people excited about my passion. So sharing your knowledge and energy will come back to you twofold, even if you feel, in over your head sometimes. And the final point is say yes to opportunities. It can be scary at first, but think about the times where you've done things and you've been reluctant to do it at the start, but then you grew from them in the end. It's all about growth, support, and heart at Urban Gorillas. Thanks so much for listening. We have a short video as well that we can show you if we have time, but happy to continue on if we need to.
Thank you so much to all of the urban gorillas that spoke. Sarah, Callum, Sam, you did a fantastic presentation. We are running a bit tight on time. So Callum, it would be really great if it's a YouTube video, if you don't mind putting that in the chat, or alternatively, we can share it around with the recording as well later. Sorry about that, but yeah, thank you so much. We've got some comments and questions that have rolled through. Big fans of the Urban Gorilla Sensory Garden. We've got a comment here from Sarah saying, as someone with ADHD and anxiety, I absolutely love that idea. And also, I personally love bird watching. So, Callum, if you could please sign me up, I'd be very interested. So let's kick off the Q&As. Kylie, would you like to read one out first?
Absolutely. So it looks like we've got a question from Graham in the chat. And to anyone else sitting on a question, please remember to head over to the Q&A section of your Zoom and type it in there. So both great presentations, Graham says, and he said, this is gold. Are you looking, so this is for the Urban Gorillas. Are you looking to build your Urban Gorilla group in other educational institutions such as Monash, Holmesglen, etc., to help them initiate their own group?
Definitely. Urban Gorillas started with Deakin, just because we go to Deakin. But that doesn't mean we can't expand elsewhere. We've had messages from like Geelong, West Melbourne, like very, very spread out. So no, we want to expand elsewhere. So definitely keep that under your hat.
Awesome. Laura, do you want to go to the next question in the chat?
Yeah, sure thing. We had a question from Cherie, who just wanted to ask, could you please, this is for Sam and the Urban Gorilla Co., could you please list the organisations that Urban Gorillas work with in the chat? Thank you. Have you got a few on the tip of your tongue you'd like to share that you work closely with or partner with?
Yeah, definitely. Big shout out to Kyoncute Alliance. Well, the Victorian Environmental Friends Network we've worked with as well, of course. Rewilding Stonington, back to Nettleton, Bundara Council. We've reached out to a lot of small organisations. Not on the tip of my tongue. We can definitely do some digging for those ones, but the main ones would be Kyoncute Alliance, Melbourne Water, Bundara Council, Rewilding Stonington, back to Nettleton, and I think I missed one. But yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, there's a bit.
There's a whole bunch being chucked in the chat at the moment, so it looks like it's going crazy. We did have one question in the Q&A box, but it looks like Callum is typing an answer for that one. So I might quickly jump to a question from Laura asking, why gorillas?
Why gorillas? Do you want the real answer or do you want the other answer? We just did some planting one day. Whether we did it in the right way was questionable. Yeah, but we kind of just came up with the Urban Gorillas, like just plant a tree, here it is, kind of thing. We're not saying we promote it, but that's what it is.
I think there are many groups out there covering many different locations and demographics who can say they've done the same. So
yes, we're good.
There's another question from Susie at the moment saying, what are the barriers to joining local friends groups for the Urban Gorillas? Are you hoping to be pan-Victoria, i.e. not restricted to one locality?
I love that. Yeah, I've had so many thoughts with this. But definitely, I don't want it to be restricted to Melbourne, Victoria, or elsewhere. It's literally about connecting with your local environment. So getting youth interested in their backyards, getting them touching the earth, finding bugs, looking at birds, playing with plants, and just really just inspiring youth. And that doesn't have restriction in geographic terms. Like that is fundamentally a human property. And if people can look at that in that light and get kids and youth and young adults excited and passionate about leading, then shoot your shot.
Right.
And a great part about all of this as well is the slow kind of build of like moving out geographically means that we have more opportunities for, say, connecting with different nurseries, for instance, that are willing to provide us with plants, or connecting with different groups that are willing to help us as well as us sharing with others. So the larger you grow and the more geographically spread you are, then you can kind of also still centralize resources as well, which is good.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. And I suppose I have a question to wrap us up, because I feel like the Urban Gorillas, they're getting a lot of love in the chat. But I have a burning question for Lucinda around your research, because that really intrigued me. And I understand that the data is still coming in, so conclusions may still be not to be confirmed yet. But you mentioned that some of the survey data that you got was a lot of young people were attending with their family, and maybe this might be opinion, but if you got based on any data, do you think, in your opinion, that getting families to kind of embed those values of the value of nature and the value of volunteering is what might encourage the next gen of young people to get into volunteering, and that maybe targeting parents and families might actually be a long-term way of investing in youth volunteering?
Yeah, I think so. That was a really good question, first of all. And yeah, so we did have heaps and heaps of like young families and families coming with really young kids. And luckily, a lot of our stallholders had a range of activities, not only just for adults and for just like handing out brochures, but they had lots of colouring kits and interactive things you can play with. So that was really great to see. And I do, personally, in my opinion, I do think installing environmental values, or just having open conversations about the local environment and like age-friendly things about maybe what climate change is, and understanding the importance of your local areas and your local lakes or local wetlands or whatever is around you, I think is super important, and can encourage that kind of long-term environmental awareness behavior. It's certainly what happened with me. My parents talk to me about environmental stuff all the time, and here I am. So I think it's super important.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Lucinda, for your research. Budding's already a scientist, but I'm looking forward to reading your plethora of papers that will come out soon on the topic.
Awesome.
And thank you so much to the Urban Gorillas as well for taking time out this evening to promote your incredible work. But alas, the show must go on. And so I'm very excited to present our next speaker for the evening, Liz Wade. Liz describes her vocation as healing work for people and the planet, and her life purpose as creating space for deepening understanding, connection, care, compassion, and community, for the spiritual and sacred, and for reflection, learning, healing, and growth. Liz facilitates the Good Grief Network's program, 10 Steps to Personal Resilience and Empowerment in a Chaotic Climate. She also works with the Friends of the Earth Melbourne as the Gas-Free Vic Network organiser, and volunteers with the Act on Climate Collective and the Wellbeing Working Group. In Ballarat, she volunteers with the local Repair Cafe, Cloth Nappy Library, and local Climate Action. What an incredible presenter. I'm so excited to hand it over to you, Liz.
And hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for having me. And yeah, thanks for working your way through that little mouthful that I prepared for you. Yeah, so I always do find a little bit sort of tricky to encapsulate what I do. It seems to have gotten a little bit more complicated the older I get. But I love the question that you just asked, Laura, to Lucinda, because in fact, the very first thing that I ever did was not really to be very useful, but I was a founding member of Friends of the Prom. The reason I was not very useful is because I was 10 weeks old. So I did grow up going to Friends of the Prom 5 times a year for my whole entire childhood with my family. And I 100% think that has been a really big part of why I've gone in the direction that I have. So yeah, I just thought I'd do a little journey of me, just to show that there's sort of no necessarily straight path to where you end up, um, and the way that life experiences can lead to places that you maybe don't expect along the way. So I began uni studying maths and physics, and also philosophy and history of philosophy of science. And I did study environmental philosophy along the way. And then I studied teaching, primary and secondary teaching. And I started as a grade 2 teacher at a school that had a strong environmental focus. And I particularly chose that school for that reason. And then I moved to teaching at EcoLink, which is a dedicated environmental education centre. And then at that time, I decided that I needed to push beyond what I was doing there. And so I made the choice to step away from kind of what I'd anticipated as my career of being a teacher. And I went back to doing part-time work in before and after school care and took on some more volunteering. So that included different things like Sustainable Hepburn Association and the Hepburn Relocalisation Network. And meantime, I was doing a lot of work to reduce my own personal footprint and exploring learnings around permaculture and localization. And then I also was living in community and exploring some of the facets of that, including, you know, communication and group work type things as well. There's sort of a little break that naturally happens in that space, because that was actually the point in my life where I started to realize, I guess, the immensity of the challenges that we faced, and having worked really hard on my personal footprint, reached an understanding of just how hard it was to live in a way that's truly within our limits. So then I actually took a little break and went traveling and continued that exploration of community living by traveling around to different places and volunteering at different kinds of farms and communities, and learning lots about the really different ways of living that are out there. And when I returned from that, I became a mum. So then I kind of dug deep into the personal side of things in bringing up little babies. And then when I returned to getting more involved again, I started with joining in with things in my local community. And because I was a mum, cloth nappies were close to my daily experience. So I started running that library after taking it over from someone else. And then I joined in with the Repair Cafe locally, which I continue to volunteer at monthly, which I find a really nourishing local activity. And then at the same time, we had the 2019 election, and I just really felt a deep need to get involved in climate action. So I started volunteering both locally and with Friends of the Earth Melbourne. At the same time, I also discovered the Good Grief Network, which runs a program for a peer support program, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So I've spent the last 3 years volunteering with Friends of the Earth, and have become a facilitator of the Good Grief Network program. And I do both those things, both as a volunteer and now also a small amount of paid work in both those areas. So I find that I'm constantly working around the emergent edges and exploring different things. So, you know, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing for the rest of my life. I just know where I am right now. And I find that more and more what I'm centering my work around is this idea of collective care and healing work for people and the planet. So for me, I find that to nourish my soul and to feel like the place that we are in at this time is being addressed, there's different ways that I need to do work. And the categories that I've put them into here on the screen. So for me, I feel like there's some really big changes that need to happen. And the way that I imagine getting to those places in the future is what I call holding the vision. So holding a really strong vision of a world that is centered in collective care, for example, and just holding that vision of a way, sort of shows a way to get from here to there when it can sometimes feel really far away. And I also do a lot of work to support myself, support others, and also work for continuing to work on the personal change, the community level change, and the systemic change. And then I call it living in the new paradigm. So as much as possible, living in a different way, and also doing all the learning that needs to go alongside that. And not all the things all the time, because that's a lot. So day to day, I'm often at home with my family. We're growing a garden, living a lower impact life, and choosing to work part-time and consume less. And then I do those different aspects of work. And that's all part of how I choose to spend my time. So the reason I decided to share this was just to show, that it's not necessarily you choose to do one thing and that's the thing that you do. And volunteering can be a really big part of, allowing us all to have broad experiences. So the main part of my work is around that peer support work with the Good Grief Network, or one main part of my work. And so I choose to share this beautiful diagram from Psychology for a Safe Climate. So I've recently gone through the professional development with Psychology for a Safe Climate, and I really love their model here. And what it shows is that it's really important for us to have spaces where we can be together to share the challenges and share the feelings of this time, because it is hard. And to keep going with the work, we need to take care of ourselves and to do it together. So Psychology for a Safe Climate, just to share a little bit, if you feel a need for resources and spaces to support yourselves through the work, the Psychology for a Safe Climate hold monthly climate cafes, and they also have a climate aware practitioner directory, which is a great place to start for support. And then there's also the immediate support through helplines and things like that, because it can be hard, and it is important to know that we're here together and support is available. And this is why I do this work, because the challenges we face sometimes are hard, and we must be able to take care of ourselves and support each other along the way. And we will work best together in meeting the challenges of our times if we work alongside this, if we do this work alongside the work of collective care. So the program that I facilitate is called 10 Steps to Personal Resilience and Empowerment in a Chaotic Climate. And it's a peer-to-peer support program that focuses on heart-centered process work in small groups over 10 weeks. And the 10 weeks cover these 10 steps here. So I'm not going to run through it all right now, but personally, I have done this program now as a facilitator. I've just started my 9th and 10th groups, and I continue to learn from doing this work and from sharing this work with others. And each one of these steps holds so much. So I really love having these 10 steps to keep referring back to and ensuring that I'm not forgetting any of these important aspects. And you can find the 10 steps listed at goodgriefnetwork.org. And also I've listed my personal website, and I can try chucking it in the chat or something as well, because sometimes I run groups through the Good Grief Network and sometimes I run them through other organisations, but I'll list them all there on my own personal site. And there's lots of other different ways of approaching this work too. And I know it's really silly to put up lots of links on a screen, but I just couldn't leave them out. I also highly recommend this book, Together We Can, as a really great way to learn about lots of different ways that people in Australia are making change in climate action in particular, which is a sort of an overlapping area with the sort of working with nature is climate action, and climate action is working with nature. And that's kind of my focus. So that's why I've included this as well. It's just a great resource of inspiring stories and different things that people can do. And lastly, I just wanted to mention another aspect of my work, which is always learning, listening and learning and showing up in solidarity of First Nations people. And this can be through running book clubs of the book Decolonising Solidarity, or working alongside First Nations people who are calling for people to stand in unity and protection of whale songlines, which I do in my Gas-Free Big work, or things like that. And I just wanted to share that description of country. I recently explained acknowledgement of country to an international group in Good Grief. And yeah, just having that idea of country being something that contains these complex ideas about law, place, custom, language, spirituality, cultural practice, material sustenance, family, and identity. It's such a big and beautiful thing. And to have the chance that we have to learn from First Nations people here is so important. So I just wanted to also acknowledge the real importance of always coming back to that. So yeah, just to finish, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive, and go do it, because what the world needs is people who have come alive. Thanks.
Absolutely love that quote, Liz. I think that is, almost got some chills listening to you say that one, and it definitely rings true, I think, to myself, and I'm sure a lot of the people here. So Liz, you shared some fantastic resources. Some of those have been shared in the chat, so if people want to investigate it further, and they'll also be available in the follow-up from this webinar with a lot of the other resources. So I'm very excited to introduce our next panelist, Adric. So Adric will be discussing how environmental volunteering has assisted him through his career in agronomics. I feel like I said that not right.
It's pretty close.
Thank you. Including successfully getting jobs and meeting like-minded people. He will cover the diversity of skills, knowledge, and experiences he has gained from water monitoring to landscape design for enticing native fauna into the garden, to working with an organisation that deals with government bodies and other interested parties in managing biodiversity-rich reserves across the volcanic plains of Victoria. Thank you so much.
And I apologise. I think I'm not sure which screen I'm showing you guys.
With a PowerPoint that says opportunities through volunteering. So
It's not the double screen presenter view.
no, you're all good to go.
All right, brilliant. So yeah, look, nice to meet you all, and hello. I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners. Unfortunately, my screen's now gone weird, and now you can see my presentation. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners, the Wadawurrung and the Dja Dja Wurrung in the Ballarat area, and give my respect to the peoples, the past, present, and future leaders. And I'd also like to say that we've got so much to learn from them. And through my my volunteering, I've learned more about their their connection with land and the information that they have to teach us. So what I'm going to be talking about is volunteering and the skills that you can gain through that can help you get over that catch-22 when you go for your first job. You've just studied, and you go in there and they go, well, you've got your degree, but you don't have experience. And you're like, well, give me a job so I can get the experience. So volunteering can help with that. And some of the skills from volunteering that personally I've gotten is Indigenous plant identification, water filtration processes, so looking at things differently for opportunities. So I'll go through these in more detail as we go through presentations in front of groups like this one. Working as part of a team, which is always important to show potential work prospects. Networking, meeting amazing people. Working with government organisations, finding out about organisations to build knowledge and gaining a great understanding of Australia's Indigenous culture, as I was talking about before. So I studied environmental science, majoring in chemistry, and to help get a job, I went to Ceres, which is an environmental park in Brunswick, Melbourne. They've got some really interesting ideas there. And so I basically got a greater understanding of gardening, water chemistry through the filtration system, community engagement, and report writing. And this helped me get my first job in equipment monitoring. And I'd also suggest, if you're in the Melbourne area, go and check it out if you haven't, because it's quite an interesting site. So that was Ceres. VINC, which is a Victorian Indigenous Nursery Co-op. I'd recommend these guys to the Gorillas as well. Maybe they're in Fairfield. So some of the skills through that group was Indigenous plant identification, and quite interesting on how to germinate different plants depending on what they go through in their natural environment. free plants, like Lucinda was saying before, students love free stuff. So that was always pretty cool. Talking to like-minded people, and also people in slightly different areas, still along the same lines of environmental, but horticulture degrees or something along those lines, so you can understand different areas and different aspects. Talking to students, and then again, working in groups. To the more recent, so Vinc I did after my ag science degree, after I was in environmental career for about 10 years. Did ag science, did Vinc, helped me get my job as an agronomist or a research agronomist here in Ballarat. And then I joined a few groups in Ballarat to understand the local environment and also to network and meet the community. So Ballarat Environment Network is one of the groups that I volunteer with, and that's more of a management group. So you do a lot of committee decisions on high biodiversity land areas around the volcanic plains. Introduction to government language and funding applications. So if you're potentially looking for a government job, a group like this may help to get those skills. Minute taking for meetings, it was one of the jobs, and being introduced to high biodiversity blocks of lands around the areas, going and visiting them, makes you understand and look at things differently. Most of my things have allowed me to look at things differently and have a greater understanding of what was going on. Another group that I volunteer with is Ballarat Gardens for Wildlife. So through this group, I've got an understanding of Indigenous plants for the Ballarat area and how to entice different fauna into gardens. So if you're potentially looking for a landscaping job or just understanding Indigenous plants of the area, you can do it they've got a Knox group, and I'll show that later on. This group could be really handy for those sort of skills. So what I'm trying to show through these groups is the different skills that you can gain along your volunteering career and paid career. So understanding which plants can be planted for different outcomes with regards to flora, flowering timings, giving presentations to groups. So again, you can do group presentations, which is always handy when you're talking to people and going for jobs. Again, who doesn't love free plants? Meeting like-minded people, especially being new to an area. And this is a native tree with a green tree frog in it that was in the garden. So previously I probably wouldn't have looked at it, but now that I have a bit greater understanding, it's something that quite interests me. So another thing is the Country Fire Authority, so CFA, for general land management, learning important fire skills, and helping the community again. If you want to do land management, if you had a career goal as a land manager, potentially CFA could help, or something along those lines. If I go to work being an agronomist, and this actual picture here was taken, we went to a farm to drop some stuff off. The farm was actually on fire. The fire was going through the paddocks, and we drove in and we said, "Do you need any help?" And this is as the fire hit some trees, went up, and all of a sudden the whole area got blanketed in smoke. We spent the next 2.5 hours on the truck that's in the photo there, fighting fire. So those skills then I could apply to that area. Not that I was doing CFA then, I'm pretty new to it, but it got me interested in the CFA. Cardigan Windermere Land Care Group. So again, slightly different skills, tree planting, weeding, learning about the Indigenous culture of the area. And yeah, predominantly working at the Mulla Walla wetlands, which is also looked after, or the Ben committee helped to manage that wetland. So that's why I've gotten involved with that. And then can't forget Evan. So Evan is running this webinar tonight. And so again, working in a team to organise this webinar as well as the Caring for Nature Expo, networking and meeting amazing people. There are some amazing people in this environmental area, and rubbing shoulders with them, potentially getting references off them. The network is fantastic. So, and finding out about other organisations to build my knowledge. So the next slide I go to, so this is very busy, but it was just to give you an idea. So far it's been very Ballarat centric, or 2 groups in Melbourne, one in Brunswick, one in Fairfield. And these are actually groups around Victoria. And I thank Outdoors Victoria for allowing me, and the Nature Stewards for allowing me to put this group up that they put together, this list. But it's to show you different groups in different areas. This is going to be online, so you can always come back and check it out whenever you want. And again, I was through the Evan Caring for Nature Expo that I signed up for Nature Stewards to learn more about Ballarat again. And like I was saying, there's the Knox area has Friends, Gardens for Wildlife here, Knox Gardens for Wildlife. So, you know, there are a number of different organisations, Field Naturalist Group, BirdLife. So depending on what you're wanting to do, maybe entomology excites you, which it does me. Field Naturalist is pretty cool. And then again, you know, Manningham area, Melbourne area, Melton, the Moreland area. We had a really interesting chat from the Friends of Merri Creek, and they've done some amazing stuff there. I grew up around that area, and it was really cool to hear what they had done. Yeah, Yarra Rangers. So there are groups all over the place. I guess one thing is understanding where you can find that information from. So hopefully this helps you with that aspect. My first volunteering at Ceres was because my mum said, Adric, you should go volunteer to help you get a job. And then it sort of built from there. So I'd just like to say that the main things that I've gotten out of volunteering are networking, which has helped immensely, skills for different aspects of my career, looking at things differently. So even in agricultural science, most of the guys look at the crops, and I'm looking at the crops, but also the trees around, potentially what timing they're flowering, what insects can they entice, how could we potentially plant differently is something that I'm always thinking about, and how can we bring that into it. And then never hesitate to ask a question. You can't go backwards if you ask someone for something. You may not be able to get to that stage, but you might get it later on. They might think of you and go, hey, this person asked me this. So look, there are heaps of opportunities out there for career development, meeting amazing people, and networking for that dream job or career. And so I've got the picture of the peacock here, standing out from the crowd. So you can slowly build your own feathers up, and yeah, be able to stand out from the crowd, get that job, and hopefully the volunteering will help. So thank you again for this opportunity. If you'd like to, you're more than welcome to contact me, and if I can help you, I will. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adric. What a fantastic presentation. You have honestly, you're like the white pages of environmental volunteering. That was fantastic. What a resource. We'll have to get some screenshots of that and share that around. And I just absolutely love the back-to-back presentation of Adric and Liz, because there was kind of that kind of view of environmental volunteering is feeding the soul from Liz, and Adric feeding your skill set. So I just love how well they complemented each other. And it's not just me. I'll also prove it with some data. It's coming through in the chat. We've got, that was fantastic. Thank you from Siobhan. Alicia said, very inspiring, Adric. And Stuart McCallum said, excellent stuff, who's also a long-time volunteer of Evan. And look, where there's not too many questions rolling through, and we are coming towards the end. We're coming close to our next session, which is our panel Q&A. So if questions do come through for Adric and Liz, if Liz and Adric, you want to keep an eye on that and answer any of the questions that pop in, and I might pass over to Kylie, and maybe we can jump straight into the panel for tonight.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Laura. This certainly does feel like speed dating on the extreme. Stuart, she's given me a what? Yeah, but no, we've heard from so many speakers tonight, and I'm sure myself, like everyone else here, is very keen to jump back and re-listen to this recording. So just reminding you guys that this video is being recorded, and there's going to be a bunch of resources sent afterwards. So if you've missed anything, there is an opportunity to catch up. Beautiful. And we're going to move on to our environmental panel, which is a very exciting part of the evening, where we hear from three individuals from three different groups in Victoria. They all have very different experiences in volunteering, in engaging youth, and we're basically going to pick their brains about what is the best way to engage youth, what is the value of engaging youth, and whatever else we come up with. So we're gonna hand over to each person to introduce their group, and I'll hand over to Marco first.
Hello all, and thank you so much to Kylie and Laura for emceeing tonight. It's really been amazing. So I'm Marco, and I'm a member of Ballarat Action Climate Co-op, which is an organisation based in Ballarat that is entirely youth-led. So we are basically a sort of a part of the School Strikers for Climate Australia movement, and we have organised strikes in Ballarat since the September 20 strikes. But recently we've been organising in conjunction with other Ballarat groups such as Food is Free and Extinction Rebellion, in organising local events and workshops, combating environmental disengagement within our community, especially among young people. And again, thank you so much for having me on here tonight. It's been a brilliant session.
Thanks so much. Next, I'm going to hand over to Beth from Intrepid Landcare.
Hi. Yeah, thanks guys. You're doing a good job, and thanks for having me. I'm lucky enough to work as a bushland management officer with the lovely Kylie at Knox Council. But while before I was working at Knox, I've been involved in Intrepid Landcare. So on a community level, I was in Yarra Ranges Intrepid Landcare as the president there for a couple of years, and we've just merged into Northeast Melbourne Intrepid Landcare. But I also work for the state, for the national organisation, Intrepid Landcare, which is, so as a body, we've aimed to engage that bracket that's missing from Landcare, so the 18 to 35-year-old group, and get more young people involved in the immense movement that Landcare has been since it started, and start trying to pick up the reins that have been sort of dropped for a little while. We do that by, getting a more sort of action-packed stuff on the radar and promote intergenerational connection, and also engage with traditional custodians as well.
Awesome, thanks so much, Beth. And then I'm going to hand over to Stuart.
Okay, thank you very much. Our friends at Bannockburn Bush Group. Oh, what's happened here? Can you see that screen there? Is that sharing?
I don't think it's coming up, Stuart.
Okay, what's going wrong here? How's that?
Now we're in action.
Okay, good. Our friends at Bannockburn Bush Group has the management of the reserve is been limited by the changeovers in staff and management over the years, so that our group has actually been the constant in looking after this reserve. And to do that work, we've relied on volunteers, and the volunteers have come from schools, universities, scout groups and so on. And the things that we've found useful in getting people to volunteer: make it fun, make it interesting, and explain why you're doing it, have the right set of challenges for the age and abilities of the kids, have just a touch of danger in what they're doing. So we deal with fire and hatchets and things like that. So they go home thinking, oh, that was pretty good, we wouldn't mind doing that again. Have plenty of help with the supervision of the kids, be appreciative of them, try and build a program that will not just be a one-off. They can feel engaged and do things. So here's some of our scouts who've done a whole lot of picking up of rubbish over the years. And when we first started with them, there was just heaps of stuff in the reserve, and we've gradually whittled it down so we don't have very much at all. We've got a coppicing program. We get volunteers to come and trim the trees after they've been harvested. Another group of scouts doing different work here for us. We work with both the Wathaurong in Geelong and the Wadawurrung in Ballarat, and we've actually handed over a key to the reserve to the Wadawurrung people, so they can come and go anytime they like. Otherwise, the reserve's locked to keep out vandals and all sorts of things. we ran a fun event this year or last year, Full Moon Family Fun Festival, which worked really well. We've got kids currently from the Bannockburn P12 College and from Victoria University who come and help us. And they did a bit of work burning weeds, and we had a bit of a cook up of a damper on a stick for them, as some of you might have seen at the Nature Day. So yeah, make things fun. Support them in what they're doing. Appreciate their work. They're the main things that I reckon is important. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Stuart. Those photos are fantastic, and those the ways to engage youth. I think your wisdom and experience with Friends of Bannockburn Bush, sharing that with the audience tonight is really, really insightful. So I appreciate, the photo sharing. They look great, and I like the tip of fun. That's why they call you Stuart Fun McCallum. They don't call you that for nothing, do they, Stuart?
You like
Exactly. But running off Stuart's theme of the best ways to or the top tips for engaging youth in volunteering, I might also ask Marco and Beth if you've got some of your own top tips that you would want to share.
Do you want to go first, Marco?
Sure. Well, I completely agree with the points that Stuart brought up. I feel like, just building off what he said, making sure that things are hands-on and in real life. I found that myself during the pandemic, like, everything's very online, everything's very virtual, and I found that myself, I felt really disengaged from that, and I think a lot of the other younger people have been as well. So I think that things like doing a bush camp out, or doing a tree planting, or doing a clothes swap, or something that's tactile and hands-on, and that people feel like they can actually make real change from, is something that's so important in order to engage youth. And I felt that within my organising as well, making sure that these opportunities have been hands-on, those opportunities have been so much more successful than opportunities that happen. And Beth, do you have anything to add or say as well?
Yeah, well, like you guys have said, similar things as well. And I guess as well, to engage young people, you've kind of got to do it where young people are. Young people are on social media now, so getting on social media and using it to attract young people, but also going back to basics like flyers up in shops and libraries and unis. Adric mentioned series. Flyers up there have been beneficial for us attracting more young people. Having events where you offer a skill, like, plant ID workshops or weed mapping integrated with what you're doing. Young people, every group has a skill set that maybe they haven't even identified yet. So getting your group together, figuring out what you can offer and offering it in your events is incredibly useful. And being inclusive, but also using inclusive language. So engaging and acknowledging traditional custodians and making a culturally safe space, using, LGBTQI flags on posters and flyers, mentioning language like bring a friend, or, bring gloves, but if you don't have some, we have some for you. That's already, showing that you will support them when they come along to your event. So all of those things will help to attract and bring in and engage youth and young people.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for contributing those answers. They're really insightful. And I suppose just to recap on what we've heard, so some of the best top tips that we've heard from our panelists today for engaging youth is making it fun, making it hands-on so that we can, the volunteers and the young people can see the actual changes that they're making. Within the occupational health and safety standards, making it a little bit dangerous potentially. Thanks, Stuart. Utilizing social media to reach out to audiences, as well as mapping skills and making events and your volunteer group as inclusive as possible, and thinking about language. So those are all really great ones that I think that everyone can start implementing immediately. And I'll pass over to Kylie for the next question.
Yeah, thanks so much, Laura. So the next question that we've got for the panel is, what have you found most valuable as a young person from volunteering, or as a group from engaging youth?
I think I've probably learnt more from volunteering from things than I've learnt studying. Because you get out in the field, you're dealing like people from the Geelong Field Naturalist Club. people in our Victorian Volcanic Plain Biosphere group, all the different people you meet, you pick up so many little things that you don't read about and you don't think of. It's the unknown unknowns. So that's really valuable. Just meeting other people and talking about things, really valuable.
Yeah, I really agree with that, Stuart. And I feel like being a young person, I feel like through volunteering, I found so many more role models in my life that I wouldn't have met otherwise. Like I've met other teenagers who've gone on to do uni, and I feel like I've been really inspired by them and looked towards them, as well as other adults, and they've sort of like shaped how I feel about my own life and going forward into adulthood. And so it's not even necessarily just about the organization as is. Well, I've definitely learned a wealth of knowledge from that, but also applying that friendship and sense of camaraderie into my personal life. And I feel like that's something that we could all definitely resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my most valuable things as well. I've gotten out of being involved in Intrepid Landcare. The friends that I've got, and the friendship group that I have now, being able to surround myself with other nature nerds and people that get as excited about an orchid that I do and don't judge me for being on the ground taking photos, and is a huge part of why I am still involved 3+ years with Intrepid Landcare, 4 years. But aside from that, like, I've got so many valuable transferable skills: grant writing, leadership skills, mentoring skills, my plant ID, facilitation. It's helped my mental health as well. You always feel like you're making a difference, you're doing things that are important to you. And like Sam said, Sam from Urban Gorillas said about knowledge sharing, and that being, he summed it up really well, so I don't need to repeat it. But yeah, learning from your peers and not, on someone that you're on the same level with, being able to do that in that space is really valuable.
And there's gurus too in the field. Like, has anyone met Graham Lorimer from Biosphere?
Yeah.
He's just awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing though, and is that we get so many personal benefits from it, but a massive part of volunteering is about that community. And I think community is built up from so many different people from so many different backgrounds. That essentially is what community is. And Graham Lorimer is a great example of someone who is an expert in a field, but is still out there in those volunteering communities. And I think often a lot of the people that we meet while we're studying through uni or while we're working have engaged in those volunteering spaces, or so actively engaged. And chances are you're going to meet a lot more people through volunteering than you expect, or that you would through study. I'm going to hand over to Laura for the next question.
And so, panelists, what other benefits do you believe of intergenerational relationships and experiences in volunteering? I think we've touched on it a little bit around the sense of community, but yeah, I suppose tonight there's been a real focus on youth engagement, and that is an important space, definitely, but sharing those skills involves experienced volunteers who may not necessarily define themselves as falling in the youth category per se, but it's incredibly relevant to have diversity and representation from all age groups, all different communities and cultures. So I suppose I wanted to pose that question of what are the benefits of those intergenerational relationships in volunteering?
I think it takes a while to match up your perceptions with my old person's perception and a young person's perception to how they see things and how they understand it. And we can all groups can help each other to see how things actually are, because the world is different from when I was a little tacker, and it's going to be different from when they get to my age. So there's a constant iteration of your perception of how the world is and what we can do to look after it. And in our case, we can go back like 60,000 years because we've got Aboriginal artefacts in this area, and that's a bit of a reminder of crikey, we're just learning here.
I think the benefit of being part of a young people led organisation is it can be daunting, I think, sometimes as a young person to engage with a group of an older generation as an independent young person, but as a group of young people engaging in a space with a group of an older generation, it gives a chance for proper collaboration and opportunities for mentorship, and especially friendship, which opens a space where you can learn better from each other and you can knowledge share and create a really beautiful space where you can care for country better.
And I really agree with what you just said, Beth. I feel like being a young person, like I came into this organizational space knowing literally nothing about organizing, knowing nothing about volunteering, knowing basically nothing about the environment compared to what I know now. And I feel like through this intergenerational thing, like, yes, it's brilliant for older people to meet younger people and learn their stories and opinions, but it's also so important, and probably even more important, for younger people to listen to older people as well, because there's that wealth of knowledge that older people have that young people just don't have due to their inexperience. And I think that's probably the most important part that I've found in intergenerational relationships within my organising.
It's hard to get them to see that it's important to them too. There's got to be that wedging program where they recognise there's something they need to know rather than they're going to be told stuff. So you've got to sort of pitch that as a bit of a problem to solve, and then you can work them towards solving that problem rather than just telling them the answer. I'm a teacher coming out at me, but sort of set a challenge, help them to discover the answer.
That's it. People.
Yeah, I think it's exactly, knowing that. And I think that that's where it's, beneficial. Like if you are a young person and you do want to go and join a group that is predominantly older people, go with somebody else, because there's with a friend, take another young person as a friend, and then you can start to, it's easier to recognize, I think, and have that, what Stuart said, where you learn from each other as opposed to just being told one thing, because with a bit of safety in numbers, you can properly engage a bit better. So, look up whatever your local Landkick or Friends of group is, and take a friend with you so you can really get the benefits of those relationships.
Yeah, critical mass is a pretty important thing for kids. If there's one kid and 30 adults, they're going to feel a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Whereas in our case, tomorrow I'll have 40 kids and about 3 adults, so we'll feel a bit uncomfortable.
It goes both ways, though. Like if it's a Friends of group, that wants to attract younger people, you can approach a younger-based organisation, like Marco's a youth-based. Or young people, I should say, and the Urban Gorillas is young people. Intrepid, there's lots of Intrepid groups that are around, so you can directly message them and collaborate with a young group and really get the most out of it.
Amazing. I really feel like I could sit in this conversation for the rest of the night. You guys all work off each other so well that it almost feels like you are already a group who have been volunteering together. So I really hope that we do see some collabs and features between these groups. But no, really just sending home some of those key messages that, if you're someone who wants to join a group but you feel like you might be uncomfortable, take a friend with you, invite another person with you. Or if you're a group that would like to engage someone from a different demographic, why not approach a group of that demographic? If you're a friends group, approach a youth group. So there are many different ways around this. And I hate to bring this conversation to an end because it really is so great, but we have come to the end of our evening. So Laura and I will just wrap this up beautifully.
Thanks.
Yes, definitely. And just before we head off for the evening, a huge thank you to all of the presenters and panelists this evening that have taken time out of their busy schedules and busy volunteering schedules to be here tonight and also share their knowledge and experiences. It's really invaluable, and I just want to highlight how grateful we all are to have your knowledge, and also how grateful the planet is to have your passion as well. So thank you so much for being here tonight and on Earth.
Yeah, thank you. And a massive thank you to everyone who has joined us tonight. Obviously, without our attendees, we can't host a webinar and we'd just be chatting amongst ourselves. So like we said, there have been so many resources that have come through tonight, and perhaps you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, but those resources will be made available. Following this webinar, everyone will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording, as well as those additional resources. And if there's something you're unsure of or it's not covered in the additional resources, please feel free to reach out to the VFN or Evan, and we can see if we can arrange that information for you or connect you with some of the groups that have had a chat with us tonight.
Yeah, and a very special thank you to Laura Moomore and Cherie Draper, who did a lot of work behind the scenes, and Carol as well, who did a lot of work behind the scenes to get this event up and running. So a big thank you to the Victorian Environmental Friends Network and the Environmental Volunteer Agency Network Central West as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Have a lovely evening.